Good evening. In compliance with Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code, I call to order a regular voting meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Austin Independent School District for Thursday, February 24th, 2022 at 7:02 p.m. A quorum of the board, along with a limited number of our staff members, are physically present at AISD Central Office to conduct this meeting. In addition, some staff and guests may be joining us by video. Board meetings are open to the public based on space availability to ensure social distancing and the health and safety of our community and staff. Those in attendance are required to wear a mask and maintain social distancing as ordered by the superintendent and approved by the Board of Trustees. This meeting is streaming live on AISD TV and Apple TV. It's also being broadcast on cable channel 22 through Spectrum, Grande, and channel 99 through AT&T UVerse. Closed captioning in English is available on these platforms for individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing, and to our audience tuning in remotely and here in person, welcome and thank you for joining us. We will move to the approval of the agenda. Secretary Singh, do you have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Having a motion by Secretary Singh and a second by Trustee Ashe to approve the agenda, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. And the motion passes by all those on the dais. Secretary Singh, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and the pledge to the Texas flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Juro lealtad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Honro a la bandera de Texas. Te juro lealtad, Texas, un estado bajo Dios, único e indivisible.
Good evening and welcome again. We are now going to move on to our game changer item, which is our opportunity to recognize and observe important items happening in Austin ISD and our nation. Dr. Desade, will you please share our recognitions for tonight?
Thank you, President Rodriguez. I would like to welcome Lindsay Stewart, Director for the Office of Innovation and Development, to introduce tonight's partners.
Good evening, President Rodriguez, trustees, and Dr. Elizalde. I'm here tonight to ask for formal recognition of our parks partners, the Austin Parks Foundation and the City of Austin Parks and Recreation Department, and their city's Connecting Children to Nature initiative. Now, it is my pleasure to request formal recognition from the trustees for our parks partners.
Thank you, Lindsay. Trustee Wagner, do you have a recognition statement to share?
I most certainly do. On behalf of the Austin ISD Board of Trustees, it is my honor to recognize our parks partners, Austin Parks Foundation and the City of Austin Parks and Recreation Department, for their generous commitment and support of healthy Austin ISD students through Cities Connecting Children to Nature initiative. Over the past several years, Austin ISD has been working with the City of Austin Parks and Recreation Department to prioritize investments and improvements to the 22 joint-use school park sites that are shared with the city. With investments from the city and community organization like the Austin Parks Foundation, over $469,000 has been invested in joint-use parks over the last 3 years. By being open and accessible to the public outside of school hours, these properties provide a great resource for our communities that are in areas which lack access to quality park spaces. In addition, this past fall, the Austin Parks Foundation worked with PARD and the city's Connecting Children to Nature initiative to identify needed updates to joint-use school park amenities. Through these partnerships, over $100,000 was awarded to support access to nature excuse me, to support necessary updates at joint use park sites with the goal of fostering equitable access to nature. Lastly, in response to COVID-19, 6 of our schools received outdoor learning support in the form of seating from the city, encouraging students to learn outside in a physically distant and open-air environment. For many years, our parks partners have enthusiastically partnered with Austin ISD to support and improve parks, which serve as an essential community gathering place where our students and families can go outside to learn, explore, and get active. It was with great pride that the Board of Trustees of the Austin Independent School District recognizes and thanks Austin Parks Foundation and the City of Austin Parks and Recreation Department for their partnership in support of Austin ISD students.
Thank you, Trustee Wagner, and thank you to our parks partners for all of their work with our school district. Dr. Elizalde?
Yes, thank you. Our next item is a special recognition of a few of our amazing campus staff. I would like to ask Chief Academic Officer Elizabeth Casas to introduce our next item.
Thank you, Board President, Superintendent Elizalde, and Board of Trustees. Tonight, I am so excited to be here with our counselors from 13 of our schools who are joining us tonight via Zoom. So team, please keep your cameras on while the board recognizes you. Austin ISD has a long history of recognition of our counselors through the Texas School Counselor Association and the Counselors Reinforcing Excellence for Students in Texas, or the CREST Award. We're so proud of our counselors, and I also want to recognize our counseling leadership team. We have Dr. Jane Ross, the Executive Director for Social and Emotional Wellness and Systems of Support. We've got Dr. Twyla Williams, Director over Counseling. Shakira Hamilton Adams, Secondary Counseling Coordinator. Danielle Trejo, Elementary Counseling Coordinator. Board of Trustees, we thank you for your recognition tonight of Austin ISD's CREST Award-winning counseling teams.
Thank you, Trustee Lugo. Do you have a recognition? Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to turn on my mic. Thank you so much. Trustee Lugo, do you have a recognition statement this year?
I do. As a member of the Austin ISD Board of Trustees, I take great pleasure in recognizing 12 elementary schools and 1 middle school. Ross Baldwin Elementary, Leona Doss Elementary, Go Valley Elementary, Hill Elementary, Willie Kokerick Elementary, Joe Dan Mills Jr. Elementary, Dorothy Linder Elementary. Oh my goodness, I don't know how to say the first name. How do I say that in front of Odom? Layla, okay. Layla Odom Elementary, George Sanchez Elementary, Summit Elementary, Sunset Valley Elementary, Zavala Elementary, and Small Middle School for receiving the CREST Award for 2021-2022. CREST is a continuous improvement document that gives a school counseling program an opportunity to demonstrate effective communication and a commitment to obtaining results. CREST helps counselors to evaluate their counseling programs, promote their programs to the stakeholders in their districts, demonstrate the effectiveness of their guidance and counseling programs through empirical means, and to implement the Texas and national models for school counseling programs. The Board of Trustees of Austin Independent School District acknowledges the exemplary success these counselors have obtained in receiving this prestigious award. We congratulate Lindsay Hawley and Deborah C. Alexander of Ross Baldwin Elementary, Natalie Perez of Leona Doss Elementary, Shauna West and Dulce Gonzalez of Go Valley Elementary, Stephanie Winfrey and Sarah Kelton of Hill Elementary, Angela Vera of Willie Kokerick Elementary, Becky Cardenas Salinas and Jenna Rasavi of Dorothy Linder Elementary, Christina Kern and Linda Watley of Joe Dan Mills Jr. Elementary, Shannon Saul of Layla Odom Elementary, Linda Wasilewski. Did I say that right? I never learned how to read, guys. Is that correct? Okay. My apologies, Linda. Of George Sanchez Elementary, Courtney Cardoza, Lisa A. Adams, LPCS, and Rachel Richards of Summit Elementary, Deborah Ostrom of Sunset Valley, Ken Peters of Zavala Elementary, and Sarah Cryer, Carmen Castañeda, and Cynthia Diaz of Clint Small Middle School. Congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. Rizal.
I was just wondering if there was a way for our team to be able to show all these wonderful faces to the public, because I haven't seen them on the actual public screen. I see them. I don't know if they get to see us, but we want to make sure that our public gets to see them. Is that possible? Wait, there we go.
There they
See,
are.
I needed to get y'all some airtime. Thank you all so very much. I'm like, they've been waiting all this time, President Rodriguez. We had to get them some prime time.
And we got a special guest at Natalie's house with that baby I just saw. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate everything that you all do for our students. And on behalf of the board, thank you so much for all your recognition and for all your hard work. Appreciate it. Thank y'all. Well, we're going to move on to our next item, which is the President's Report. Last month, I shared that I would provide an update tonight on the board's self-evaluation, which was originally scheduled for February 8th. This board and superintendent made a commitment to this review as a team of 10, and for that reason, we wanted to ensure we had all 10 of us available for that meeting. Prior to that date, we had some members who were no longer able to join that night, so we made a decision to cancel the meeting and reschedule for next Tuesday, March 1st. And at that meeting, the board plans to reflect and listen to one another on how our team of 10 has worked together, focused on governance, and most importantly, focused on our students. At our March 24th meeting, I look forward to providing a report on our time together. And I want to thank all of our board colleagues who substituted at the following schools these last 2 months in support of our students, our teachers, and staff. And those schools were Aikens High School, Padron Elementary, Keeling Middle School, and Williams Elementary. And again, thank you all for doing that. And we have 3 other brief items. One, I just wanted to thank Principal Leticia Vega at International School and Principal Andrew Bailey at Eastside High School for hosting a recognition of one of our students, Manisa Jeanette Mayele, at the Austin International High School. She was recently recognized by the Sister City International Group for a poem that she wrote. And we were really appreciative that Council members Pio Renteria and a representative from Councilmember Natasha Harper Madison's office were both in attendance as she read her poem. And members, we will share the poem with you that she wrote that was inspired by Amanda Gorman, our National Poet Laureate. And the next item, I want to recognize Trustee Singh to say a few words.
Happy to, thank you. Last night, while I was, wondering about the weather, I also learned about something that our governor had put out regarding trans students, and I was really just, like many in our community, wondering what the district's response to that was going to be. And without missing a beat, I received this email in my inbox, and I just want to just share the appreciation I have for administration for sending this to trustees. And I'd like to read it aloud if that's okay. It says, Board of Trustees, in regards to the recent statement from Governor Greg Abbott, we do not recognize his request that school teachers, counselors, and staff are responsible for reporting gender transitioning and transgenderism as potential child abuse. Austin ISD supports all students and we are committed to keeping students safe, regardless of gender identity, expression, or orientation. We will defer to healthcare professionals and students in decisions pertaining to students' gender presentation and transitions. So thank you to Dr. Elizalde and your team for sharing that with us. And just wanted to remind folks that on AISD's website, you can actually find a list of various resources for LGBTQ plus youth and their families. And a really good one that's listed there is the Trevor Project. It's pretty much like it sounds, www.thetreasureproject.org. And what I really like about that site is there's a place where kids and families can just have a chat online or call somebody. They have a 24-hour hotline. And I think it could be of a lot of help to folks during this difficult time. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Trustee Singh. And lastly, I want to recognize Trustee Boswell for an important message.
Microphone, sorry. Thank you. So we have a primary coming on March 1st. Early voting will end tomorrow at 10 p.m. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. You can go to votetravis.com to find the closest location to you. It should be quick and easy, and it's important. Only 5.4% of registered voters in the county have voted so far as of yesterday at the close. I did a word problem for the teachers out there. 46,769 people have voted out of our 859,400 registered voters. That leaves 631,000 of you to go vote. 812,631 people yet who still haven't voted. So if you haven't voted, please do go vote, and remember that education is always on the ballot, up and down your ballot, and we hope you'll consider public education when you vote tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Boswell. And since your mic was off at the beginning, I just want to repeat for folks that this is a nonpartisan message, and it is legally approved by our council. So
yes, my nonpartisan message from Raise Your Hand, Texas, which we are working on an advocacy institute with. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And at this time, I'm going to move to the committee reports, and we'd like to have trustees provide committee reports to our community. And Trustee Ashley, do you have an Austin Ed Fund update?
Actually, I do not. The Austin Ed Fund has not met since our last voting meeting.
Oh, thank you for that update of no meeting. Trustees, are there any other committee reports to share tonight? If there are none, we will move to the superintendent's report. Dr. Elizalde.
Thank you. Good evening again. Trustees, settle in because I've got a lot of great stuff for you to share. This year, for Black History Month, Austin ISD will celebrate our 39th annual African American Heritage Celebration virtually this Sunday, the 27th of February at 3 p.m. The theme is Elevating Future Leaders, Advancing the Dream. You can watch it on AISD TV, and I believe we have a promotional picture for it that we can show you now. The celebration will recognize and honor a total of 255 students. The top 2 African American students male and female, for each grade level in our secondary schools, as well as 6 senior scholars who have received the top student award throughout their entire high school career. The celebration will also honor and highlight 7 community honorees, including our very own Chief of Schools, Dr. Anthony Mays. I know we all think a lot about Dr. Mays here, and I absolutely cannot imagine a better role model for our students. Congratulations to all the kiddos receiving recognition. So let me tell you, February was also a very busy month for our Austin ISD athletes. We've got more good sports stories tonight than the 5 o'clock news. First, I want to recognize the O. Henry Middle School cheer team and their coach, Michael Shackelford, whose hard work and dedication took them all the way to the National Cheerleading Championship competition at Disney World this month. Now listen, back in the day, yes, I was a cheerleader, and then I was the cheerleader coach, and the furthest I ever took my squad was to the mall around the corner from our high school. So this, guys, is a really big deal. I always wanted to get to Disney, and I didn't come close. So really want to thank Coach Shackelford and the team for their wonderful competition. There are only one of 18 teams in the entire country competing in this division. O. Henry put on an outstanding performance, of course, that you can watch on TV, varsity.com. Congratulations to the team and Coach Shackelford again for this amazing, absolutely amazing accomplishment. The Austin High girls basketball team also had a great season, in case you weren't following them. They made it all the way to the regional quarterfinals. These young ladies completed a 13-1 season, with several players making all district. You might have seen something about this team on social media when senior shooting guard and captain Eleanor Bangle sang an amazing version of the national anthem before Austin High's big win against Vandergrift in the bi-district playoff game. Her a cappella performance was so moving. It was even picked up by several national news outlets. Way to go, Eleanor, and way to go, Maroons. Finally, I want to recognize Olivia and Joshua Moreno of Bowie High School. This is the sister and brother duo who both won Most Outstanding Wrestler Awards at the Region 4 Wrestling Tournament. They are the first sibling duo to achieve such a high honor. Olivia and her older brother Joshua have been sparring partners since they were kids. And as a mom, I do not doubt that at all. This season, Olivia remains the reigning wrestling champion in the State University Interscholastic League. The Austin American-Statesman called her, and I quote, arguably the best pound-for-pound wrestler in the state, regardless of classification. At the UIL competition, Olivia won all 4 of her matches by pinfall. If you know anything about wrestling, that's a really big deal. She went 42-0, 42-0 this season and has been undefeated since her freshman year. You might recall that last season, Olivia also took home the state title along with her cousin at San Marcos High School. Joshua, her brother, is a 4-time district champion, regional champion, and state qualifier. And as impressive as all that is, what Joshua did after he came up just short in his own state championship match is even more impressive to me. To help his sister, he served as her practice and warm-up partner to help her win, because we rise by lifting others. It's beautiful to see these siblings admire each other and modeling for all of us. Olivia and Joshua, you continue to amaze us with your hard work and talent. Congratulations. And finally, another story that'll tear us up. I want to tell you about one of our crossing guards who taught me something about showing up for our kids. We like to say we would do anything to protect our kids. Mr. Rick Waters, a crossing guard at Hill Elementary, did just that the other day, and you're not going to believe what he went through. Mr. Waters is a father, a husband, and importantly for this story, a Navy veteran. He's quick with a joke and cares passionately about our kids that he helps every single morning. He doesn't like the spotlight, though. He's happy being the great guy next door. On January 31st, Mr. Waters was hit by a car. It gets worse. For some reason, the person got out of his car and began assaulting Mr. Waters. But Mr. Waters is a Navy man and remembered his training, and so he knew not to curl up, and he was able to defend himself. The assailant ran away. Fortunately, Mr. Waters was taken to the hospital and released later that same day. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I don't think after being hit by a car and assaulted for something that someone else did to me, I would be thinking about going back to work the next day. Well, you'd be mistaken if you thought that's what Mr. Waters did, because the very next day, Mr. Waters was back on the corner helping our kiddos cross the street safely. He said it was a matter of honor. Everyone told me not to go to work, but I didn't want to let the assailant win. There certainly is a lot to admire about a guy who gets knocked down, but gets up again because the kids need him. But what Mr. Waters wants us to take from his story is to be careful in school zones and crosswalks. Like a true Navy man, he had his message. He said, the drivers have gotten more aggressive. Because Mr. Waters showed true perseverance, we recognize him tonight and thank him for his service to Hill Elementary and to Austin Independent School District. Mr. Waters, I assure you, from everyone here, we thank you, truly. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Elizalde. Trustees, are there any questions? No questions on how to safely go across the crosswalk. Thank you so much, Dr. Elizalde. Members, our next item is a scorecard update on student outcomes. And tonight we will be reviewing the middle of the year progress for our middle school students in both math and reading. Dr. Elizalde.
Thank you, President Rodriguez. I'm going to ask our Chief Academic Officer, Elizabeth Casas, to take the majority of tonight's discussion. I am suffering from a little bit of a head cold, so I start to cough a little bit. I have tested for COVID negative each day this week, so rest assured. But because I don't want to interrupt our presentation, Ms. Casas is going to begin our report on the scorecard. Chief Casas.
Okay, good evening once again. So today we're talking about our scorecard goal for students identified economically disadvantaged from grades 6 through 8, reading and math. The STAR data we show on the first page, the template, that our last year's data reflects 16% of our students who are at the MEETS level. And today we're talking about the goal progress measure for our students in middle school reading and middle school math. And so a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the beginning of the year data. So today we're going to dig a little deeper into the middle of the year data. So here you see that while the state had a decline of 10 points, our students in Austin, we showed a decline of 14 points. And again, this data was shown a couple of weeks ago. And as a reminder, in Austin, we had about 38% participation rate, the students that took STAR, compared to the state that was at 85%. So we had a really low participation rate last year. And so you see the similar data that we looked at 2 weeks ago in terms of beginning of the year to middle of the year. And so while you see that we didn't make a lot of growth on the absolute achievement for reading for our students, we went from 20% to 21%. For African American students, for Hispanic students, we went from 23 to 22. In math, we went from 10% to to 12% in mid-year, and from 12% to 13% for our Hispanic students on MAP. So that tells one story, but today I really want to dig deeper and kind of tell a different story. So if you go to the next slide, yes. So the top graph shows our absolute performance. So you see the beginning of the year data compared to the middle of the year data. And you see that it really didn't have very much, we didn't show a lot of gains in it. And so if you look at the second table, there's a focus on growth targets. And we talked a little bit about that last time, about achievement versus growth targets. And I'm going to go a little deeper to really explain what that means. And so while we may not have seen a lot of growth on the absolute achievement, when we look at the growth, the percent of students that met their growth targets, you see that for reading, or at the all level, 48% of our students met their growth target. And then when you break it down from economically disadvantaged, 44% compared to non-economically disadvantaged at 51%. So while you see a larger gap in performance at the achievement level, you see a smaller gap at the percent of students meeting their growth target. And so you're still wondering, what does that really mean? And so we'll go a little bit deeper into that in just a minute. And so you see a similar trend on math, where at the all level, we went from 38 to 39% of our students at the on grade level, and the economically disadvantaged from 16 to 17, and non-economically disadvantaged from 54 to 55. However, when you look at the percent of students meeting their growth targets, now you see a little bit more of traction. So you see that 58% of our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders on reading met their growth target. And so while the overall achievement doesn't look very promising, when you start looking at the growth of students, there is a different story to tell. And so when we look at where we are in terms of overall progress, based on the number of students meeting their growth targets, we say that we are at the developing level. We believe that if we continue to make the kinds of growth that we've seen from beginning of the year to the middle of the year, that we will be on track moving forward. And so some of the adjustments that we made are similar to what we've talked about prior to. What I do want to highlight is that as our district, this is our first year of implementing our full viable comprehensive curriculum. You know, and research has shown that it takes between 2 to 4 years before you institutionalize change. And so being our first year, we have some early adopters, and then we have those that are resistant, and we have a lot of staff that still want to use their old lesson plans. And so we do recognize that there is work there in training to really dig into the curriculum. And that's one of the reasons why there's been a lot of talk about planning time and giving teachers time during the day to work with their grade level colleagues to really dig into the curriculum and unpack the standards and have time to really plan the lesson delivery, because our curriculum does provide the what they need to teach and resources, and so our teachers need time to really work with their colleagues and really dig into how to teach, and then look at student artifacts to see the impact of the delivery. Professional learning opportunities. This is similar to things that we've talked about in the past. And next steps are to continue to provide more training for our teachers. We are working with the Office of School Leadership to use one of the professional learning community planning periods with our secondary schools so that they are really digging into our MAP data and that they have some more opportunities to really understand what the data tells them, how to use it so that they can personalize learning for all of our students. So with that, I'm going to turn over to, let's dig in a little bit deeper into the data. So Jacob, if you will. Uh-oh, technical difficulties. So there are a lot of technical terms, and I tried to make this, as palatable as possible. So I'm going to go slow and and hopefully explain this in a great way. So when we look at our MAP growth data, let's see. Okay. So the data that we get from our MAP growth assessment gives us actually 3 different pieces of information. First of all, it shows us absolute performance, which is the achievement. It shows us how a student performs on a tested subject relative to their peers by giving them a RIT score. And then it measures growth, which reflects the difference between the last time they tested to the current time. So it looks at the difference between 2 RIT scores. And so the RIT score, again, we talked a little bit about this, is the RIT score measures the level of difficulty at which students are performing. So on the left, you see the continuum from K to 12. And so the lower the RIT score, that means the lower the performance, and the higher the RIT score means the higher the performance. And you see on the bottom the percentile ranking from low, low average, to high average, and high. And when we look at the goals that we're measuring, the green and the blue are on grade level and above. So the third thing that it gives us is longitudinal data. So this, again, is our first full year of implementation with MAP, but the benefit of this is that now we will be able to track our students' history throughout their career here in Austin ISD, and we'll be able to see how they are progressing from one year to the next. So at the end of each assessment, a student receives a RIT score, and the RIT score is individual to each student. Based on the RIT score, that becomes the starting point, and from there it generates a targeted growth projection. So what it does, it groups students based on the starting RIT score, and then depending on the average growth based on the millions of students that are normed through the MAP assessment across the country, it tracks the average growth depending on students that had the same starting point at the RIT score. And so the projected target then becomes individualized for every student, looking at their starting point and the projected growth if they were making average growth compared to their peers. And so I know that's a little technical, so let's look at a couple of students. So here, I would like for you to meet Eric. And Eric is a current 6th grader. Let me find Eric. Eric is a current 6th grader. He receives emergent bilingual supports. He's been enrolled in Austin ISD since he was in pre-kindergarten, and he's an average student. He makes A's and B's and some C's, and he has about a 94% attendance rate. So here, let's tell his story. So we found 2 students that had been with us last year so that we can show growth over 2 years. So last year, or this year, beginning of the year, Eric scored at 198 RIT score, which puts him at the 16th percentile. So you see the arrow here with the red? This is his starting point. So he was low, so he was scoring right under the 21st percentile. What we know about Eric is based on last year's data, he had a projected growth of 6 points. So based on all other students who started at the same point last year in 5th grade, he was projected to be on target if he made 6 points. However, what happened at the beginning of the year, he actually decreased 12 points. That put him at the 1 percentile. That was at the beginning of the year. So now that we have his beginning of the year data at 198, he is now projected to, his projected growth target is an increase of 5 points. So he went from 198 to 212. So now he went from being at the bottom 21st percentile to being almost under the 40th percentile, and he made a growth of 14 points. So he not only met his growth target, he exceeded his growth target. And so you see here then, based on growth, he was outperforming his peers at the 98th percentile. And so here's a visual graphic of Eric's time with us. So at 5th grade last year, at the beginning of the year, so here you see that he didn't test our middle of the year or end of the year. And if you remember last year with the in and out, with the remote learning, there was a lot of flexibility to, for students to test and not test. And so He did not have a middle of the year or an end of the year. And so you see from the beginning of last year, 5th grade, he was in the yellow. He was right under being on grade level. And by the time this year started, at the beginning of the year, he went from 210 to 198. But wow, look at that growth that he made. He bounced back all the way up to 212. And this is reflective of our amazing teachers that are personalizing learning and making sure that our students' needs are being met.
And so before we move on, I just want to, for a moment, this is what we want to be celebrating right now, because we're not going to get to absolute or achievement overnight. And each journey begins by taking one step at a time. And our teachers are doing this. This is not an isolated student. This is the work that our teachers are doing every single day in the classroom. Some students are meeting their growth targets, some are exceeding the growth targets, and there are some that aren't even captured on that table that Ms. Casas showed earlier, because we only measured those who actually met the target. So in this example, where Eric was, his recommended growth target was +5, imagine we have quite a few that might have had a +5 projected growth, but they got +4. Well, we didn't count those on the table just yet because we wanted to just define whether they actually met the growth target. So I really think it's important to just emphasize the amazing work that the teachers are doing. And keep in mind, this is the first time that the teachers have had this tool as a longitudinal tool from K to 8. So they're now able to see all the work that they were doing during that first semester. What did it result in at the middle of the year? And now they'll be able to see all of the work. That's really what teachers are motivated by, is the hard work I'm putting in, is it getting me what I want with students? Because they work so hard for our students. And this is just one illustration of, again, just the work that our teachers, this to me was one of those that just told such a story about the pandemic and how over time, our teachers are already getting students like Eric even above where they were more than a year and a half ago.
Thank you, Dr. Elizalde. So now let's meet Natalie. And obviously these are not the students' names. We made their names up to protect their identity. But we're gonna talk about Natalie now. So Natalie is African American. She's been with Austin ISD since kindergarten. She has perfect attendance and she's a straight A student. So let's see her journey. So at the beginning of the year, she was at 232 RIT score. So she was scoring in the 91st percentile. So what we know from Natalie from 5th grade is she had a projected growth target of increasing by 5 points. However, she only grew 2 points. And something to note here is the higher the students get, their growth projection becomes lower because it's harder for them to grow. So based on how, instead of meeting her 5-point growth target, she only made 2 points. So she was scoring in the 36th percentile compared to her peers. So now that we know her starting point of 232, her projected growth target for the middle of the year was an increase of 2 points. But what we see is Natalie went from 232 to 238, so she actually exceeded her projected growth target, and she increased by 6 points, and she's now scoring in the 94th percentile. And you see the similar trend with growth. Since she exceeded her projected growth target, then she is in the 80th percentile compared to her peers who also started at 232. And so here you see the growth of Natalie. So Natalie was with us at the beginning of the year. So we have her scores from beginning of the year at 230 at 5th grade. Middle of the year, she was at 228. At the beginning of the year, she was at 232, and look where she is now. She is in the 94th percentile, and she is projected to continue growing.
I think those were two really good examples because we wanted to demonstrate that students that may seem to have a bigger challenge in front of them are making bigger jumps, and there's also acceleration for those students who are already in that high-performing band. So this isn't about moving everyone to the middle. It's about making growth personal or progress personal, so that if you're already performing well, how can we help you perform even better? And I think that's an important message, because what we certainly don't want is what, of course, many of us know about and hear about sometimes is, oh, I'm going to teach to the middle, and that reduces the academic achievement of high-performing students. And that's why making progress personal is so important in the design that Ms. Casas and the curriculum team have put together that's being implemented by school leadership.
And so to summarize, while we're being graded by the absolute performance at the achievement level, I am so proud that our board celebrates the growth and allowing us to celebrate the growth and the hard work of our teachers and students, especially after everything they've been through with the pandemic. We want to value all of our students and honor their starting point and recognize that there is opportunity for them to grow, so that we don't impact their self-esteem because, oh, you're not doing well. No, you have a wonderful starting point, and we're going to take you where you are to the next level through our curriculum products. And you see the similar with the reading achievement. You know, as Dr. Elizalde mentioned, we look at the achievement from the 30,000-foot view. We start looking at the percent of students that met their growth target, and then there's a whole nother number of the percent of students that actually grew from one assessment to the next. And so coming soon next month, we'll bring you those three numbers. You'll have the achievement, you'll have the percent of students that met their growth target, and we're gonna bring the number of students that actually made growth, so that we can be looking at that as we're analyzing and reflecting on what we're doing and what's working, and how do we continue to be a continuous improvement model for our district. And with that, I'll turn it over with Dr. Mays and the team.
So good evening, Dr. Elizalde and President Rodriguez and the board. So in our office, the school leadership and the academic team, we pride ourselves on our ability to collaborate and provide support to our campus administrators and our teachers and our students. And so through our leveraged leadership framework, we are focused on routine and scheduled campus visits to support dialogue that focuses on areas of praise, probe, and polish. And so while the classroom is our focus, we also get to visit PLCs and observe campus culture. And so some of you have gone on those walks with us, and we appreciate you all stepping in on those visits. Through our ongoing PLCs, this is why the planning time is so important, because it helps us to develop consistent practices that we're all focused on improving. And like Ms. Casas just said, we've just started on this journey, and so that time is critical to helping our administrators and our teachers grow. And so as we strengthen our practices, we are able to see 48% of our 6th through 8th graders meet their growth projection target. But like Ms. Casas just said repeatedly, we have not shared with you all the growth for everybody. And so continuous improvement is our goal. And I'll now turn it over to Dr. Stout, our Associate Superintendent for Secondary Schools, for a deeper dive on how we will continue to support growth.
So the Office of School Leadership collaborates with the Academics Office on a routine basis. Our 9-week data meetings allow for the Office of School Leadership and Academics team to recognize our strengths and weaknesses and respond with interventions. Our observation and feedback cycle allows for us to observe for differentiation within small student groups to support student outcomes. Currently, we conduct routine campus visits with the intention of reviewing instructional practices, looking at curriculum, and having coaching conversations with campus leaders. This cycle of observation and feedback is critical for our team. So PLCs. In considering our students' needs, MAP growth overviews have taken place with campus administrators and teachers. And it takes practice to really understand how MAP growth works and how to utilize the data to help students achieve at higher levels. Our goals for using MAP growth and SEA data in PLCs are to plan with student experiences in mind and to allow for time to plan to make progress personal for students. PLCs are critical to elementary and secondary campuses because this is where we unpack standards to design instruction. So responding to the data. In responding to the data, we want to celebrate our successes first. We want to teach students in small groups through instruction that fits student needs. as stated in the data. We want to give students opportunities to engage in fun and effective online instructional tools. And in order for us to grow, we need to be able to refine the processes that support teachers and administrators for positive student outcomes. We need to continue to provide relevant professional development for teachers and administrators, continue to study our data, and make instructional adjustments. Through PLCs, we will continue to support each other in this process. Thank you.
That concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Trustees, are there any questions? Trustee Lugo and then Trustee Foster.
Thank you. So I'm wondering, so first of all, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the pictures. I'm thinking of all the meetings that I prepped for execs, and I was always told, give them pictures. And now I'm like, dang it. Yes, give us pictures. So thank you for that. And then kind of looking at slide 11, where y'all talk about the Office of School Leadership and the academics, kind of like what's next and how to continue improving. I do want to thank Dr. Mays for allowing me to accompany you and your staff on some observations and just an opportunity to have a conversation about the intent behind the walkthroughs, the kind of the longer term goal of really getting quality feedback that's actionable, and the steps that you all are taking. It's not perfect right off the bat, but y'all are aware that it's an iterative process. So I really appreciated being part of the observation. So as I'm looking at slide 11, I'm wondering, is there, when I think about feedback and how challenging it can be for, whether it's a principal, a instructional coach, and really in any sector, the quality of feedback and how it's delivered is in part really based on the relationship between the person who's doing the evaluation and the person who's listening. And so I'm wondering if y'all can speak to some of the supports that are being given to campus administration or to the folks that are doing the walkthroughs, so that each time, we just get a little bit better at the walkthroughs and make them more meaningful.
Yes, ma'am. And so with that process, like you said, it's on refining it and strengthening it is an ongoing process. And so we do a number of different things. The consistency and the practice of us having those walks that you participated in and Trustee Boswell participated in, those conversations in the hallway where we're calibrating, give leaders an opportunity to kind of role play. I think one of the things that we try to make sure we practice is, okay, how are you going to share that feedback, right? What will that conversation sound like? Human capital is also a part of that, so our principals are engaged in professional development now, just practicing having challenging conversations. And so we began that as a part of the leverage leadership work, just to give principals and leaders the tools to be able to engage in these conversations. We also have scaffolds like our toolkit, our instructional playbook, so principals aren't just having to make up, information as they try to go and deliver, because we recognize, again, it's a muscle. It's the shift from being an operational leader to an instructional leader was, I guess it was a challenging paradigm and shift, and Dr. Elizalde can probably speak to that more than I can, but it's a muscle that we have to continue to grow. So for all the scaffolds that we can put in, we're constantly evaluating the process to just figure out how can we help our leaders get stronger with delivering that quality feedback that you're talking about.
Thank you. And then I'm wondering if y'all could share a little bit about, as more walkthroughs are being done and more PLCs with a kind of like a balance of structured PLCs and probably some of the PLC work that AISD teachers were accustomed to in previous cycles. Can you talk a little bit about what about those times when, maybe y'all are visiting a Title I campus, or maybe y'all are meeting with teachers who have students with additional special education or instructional needs, and how does that, what do those supports look like for those particular campuses or for those particular teachers?
So I'll start, and then I'll pass it to Dr. Stout. I think that the framework is the same for any student that we're talking about, right? So when we're talking about data-driven instruction through the PLCs, we're still leveraging that intervention to meet any other student needs. So special needs, African American, Hispanic, it's really about drilling down into the data and figuring out where the areas of struggle are. And so whether it's through map growth data or SCA data, it's really trying to really be surgical in terms of how you respond to intervention and how you support individual students. But we also have some other pieces that are more intentional that focus just on our special education students, and I'll let Dr. Stout kind of share that.
Yes, we're very proud about taking people from various departments on walkthroughs with us. It's very important for us to leave central office and go see what our work looks like on campuses. And so we've taken some staff members from special education with us. And what we do is we go in with the student accommodations, and the campus doesn't know which classes we're coming to. I don't know which classes we're coming to. We just ask the special education department to come, bring a schedule and the accommodations for the student, and then we go to that student's classroom and we look at that student, how they're working, what supports that student is receiving, just to make sure that those students are receiving the supports that they need. And we get a real good view of how they're interacting with teachers, the instruction they're receiving, the tools that they're using in the classroom, and we give feedback on that. And so I think it's important to just drill down to the student, see the face, have a conversation with the student, and so we do a lot of that. We've taken Dr. Villalpando, Assistant Superintendent for Special Programs, with us lately. She's new, and she's gone with us on walkthroughs to visit the dual language programs. And she's also gone on special education visits with us, and then we were off. But just to see how they look and to hear the language that's being spoken, what percentage of the language is being spoken in the classrooms, are the students also speaking the language, are they writing, and if they're being successful, if they're engaged. And something very important is we're looking at rigor and on-target TEKS. And so we look at a lot of things when we walk through classrooms. Lately, we're taking staff members from our academics department with us. So they just kind of trade out. I send the invitations out and they forward, and whoever comes with us, great. But we're looking lately at rigor, at instructional delivery, and curriculum. We're looking at if they are aligned, and pedagogy. What's the delivery? How are students receiving the instruction? Is it, whole class instruction? Are we stopping to turn and talk about what we just learned and before we share an answer, so that students are sure that, yeah, I think this is what the answer is before they share with the class? So we're looking at a lot of things with various departments, and we're happy that you've come with us as well. You gave some very good feedback when we were at Garcia together. But it's enjoyable too to see the growth. One thing that I wanted to add was, in what Dr. Mays was talking about, is when we speak with principals, we actually role play. So when we ask, what are you how are you going to improve this? For example, rigor. How are you going to improve rigor? And what conversations are you going to have? Well, I'm going to say this. Well, tell me, what are you going to say? How are you going to say it? And so we'll have a coaching conversation and a role play of what that sounds like. And then we'll leave, before we leave every campus, I think you might have seen it, we leave a praise, a probe, and a polish, sometimes one or two of each. And then that's the task, or the to-do, the improvement to make when we come back to the campus. Those are the things that we'll be looking for.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Some of what you mentioned made me think of some additional questions, but I'll pass it to Trustee Ashe. I said I was going to be good tonight. and try to share.
Sorry, Trustee Ash.
Thank you so much. I loved the additional handout that we got, and I really appreciate walking through the map growth. You did bring up something when we were talking about, I believe it was Natalie, was the second young lady, the student that we were looking at. And one of the data points that you brought forward in that presentation was the fact that there was a very good attendance. And so I was wondering if you have, what if any, correlation is existing, given that COVID, we know, is not necessarily helping our attendance for people who may have to quarantine or for other reasons, and was wondering if there's a correlation in what we're seeing in the numbers, or if there's anything you were able to pull from the data in that regard.
I don't know if, we haven't looked at the attendance data and triangulated it towards the achievement data, but what we do know historically is if students aren't coming to school, they're not getting the instruction. And so when you saw the example of Eric, who had a beginning of the year score last year and didn't test until this year, there was a huge decline, and we don't have a middle of year or end of the year data point for him. So the wondering is, was he at home? Was he on remote instruction? What does that story tell us about Eric's experience last year that caused him to have such a huge decline from one year to the next? But we do know historically that attendance is correlated to high performance. I don't know if that is part of the data points that our school leadership teams are looking at, but it should be.
So I will share an example. One of our student groups whose data is low, and we are looking at it, and we're trying to make it better, try to make our students grow, is our special education students, right? And so we've noticed when we physically go to the campus that 1 of 2 of our special education students are absent, and the data is low. So there's a correlation right there. It's a real life correlation. And so, when we debrief with the principals, that's part of what we talk about. Why aren't they here? What are we doing about getting them back? Are we going to visit? Are we having conversations with the parents? If they're not here, we need to find out the root cause. Do they not feel comfortable here? Do they feel like they're too far behind? Do we need to put a plan in place for them to come back and feel successful with the work that they submit, to feel caught up, to continue moving forward with the learning and continue to come to school? So the efforts are being made. We're having those discussions, but that I think is an example of what the correlation between absences and achievement.
Thank you. I would love to see if that data becomes available, that y'all are examining the attendance as it compares. I would be interested to learn if you learned something from that in the future. I know that attendance is, like I said, I know attendance right now is tough. It's tough on some of our families when they have to have COVID, or if they have to quarantine, and we know even pre-COVID that attendance was extremely important in student achievement. So would love to see how COVID is impacting that, as well as what we are doing as a district to help with attendance, or if we have a targeted strategy to help with attendance as well.
So Trustee Ashley, I don't know if you recall the students, I'm forgetting the whole title, but you all approved for us to have one of those student success specialists at every vertical team. And so the student success specialists, along with Katie Cat Stevens, have brought a lot of structures in place for the district, right? We didn't quite have some of those attendance structures in place. And so what she's done is really organize the work and the data to be able to provide every vertical team support with interventions. And so recently they trained front office staff. We also identified an attendance administrator at each campus to be able to corral all the attendance efforts at the campus. We're also working on, again, guiding them with attendance committees to be able to have those discussions. Dr. Elizalde met with a group of principals just this week to talk about, how to leverage the attendance committees, understanding that it's not always black and white, right? There's other pieces to the puzzle in terms of why students are there. and then talking about how can you leverage the attendance committee to support those students and families.
That's wonderful, and thank you for the reminder. I do appreciate that, that we did approve that, so thank you. And I'm excited to hear and look forward to seeing as we've implemented this new strategy, what impacts it's going to have. That's exciting. And my second question is, I'm going to kind of jump a little bit back into Ms. Casas. One of the things we were talking about, not in this part, but actually in the other part of the strategies you were discussing, that you had some teachers that were, and I believe the term you used, early adopters. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about that, because I'm not sure that I fully understand what you mean by those that are early adopters versus those are not, and if you could just expand on that. I'm not sure I understood.
Okay. Anytime there's anything new, you have people that just dive full in, embrace it, and they're early adopters. They implement the new change. And then you have others that are going to sit back and kind of look and see what outcomes are they getting. You know, they're a little bit reluctant. I have my trusted and lessons that I've always relied on. However, the challenge there is that those lessons are correlated to the outcomes that we're currently looking at, right? And so there is a lot of work in making sure that our teachers have access to really understanding how to use all of the products. Our curriculum this year, it's the first year that we've really built out that full comprehensive curriculum that's looking at not only the grade level standards, but also looking at the scaffolds for previous skills that we talked about before. And then also for our students that are high performing, we want to make sure that they have access to the information that they're ready to start learning. And so early adopters are really those that are just going in, they're diving in, they're embracing it, they're in there playing with the curriculum and making it come to life. And Dr. Mays, we talked about when he goes to campuses now, they pull up the curriculum and let's see what we should be seeing in the classroom and kind of gauge where they are in terms of, implementation. I would also add that Eric's example is a good one. One thing I failed to mention when I talked about Eric has 2 accelerated plans. He has one for reading and he has one for math. And so in those accelerated plans, you have to customize the specific targeted instruction that you're going to do to improve those scores. And you saw the outcomes from the beginning of the year to the middle of the year where he had just accelerated disproportionate gains. And those are the types of things that we see when everything is really targeted to specific student needs, the skills that they are that they need to get to the next level.
Okay, and so when you're referring to what they're adopting, you're meaning the curriculum that's been provided by the district. But when you say curriculum, that there's still room, and I'm asking. This is a question, but it's not going to sound like one. But it is a question. There's still room within the curriculum that the district provides to allow for creativity by the teacher. And I think because I speak from a teacher space, meaning I know when I'm excited about a lesson that I'm going to do, it was always 10 times more successful because when I was excited, the kids were excited. So, some of that excitement would come from me having the opportunity to kind of find my own way of or whatever that topic might be to teach that topic. And so I'm just trying to kind of I wanted to make sure that I was understanding correctly and that the term, am I saying, does that make sense? Like I said, it's not going to sound like a question, but it's a question.
So I can give an example, and Trustee Boswell actually was in on a walk where we walked into a classroom, and when we say early adopters, there was an instructor that was teaching vocabulary in isolation. This was like a 7th or 8th grade class, and we were like, you're not gonna, the students aren't gonna be where they need to be if we're just teaching instruction in isolation, right? And so this is the power of the coaching conversation. So immediately we walk out of the classroom and we pull up the standard with the principal and we say, let's look at what the standard calls for to have happen with those students. Because you can still address the vocabulary through the curriculum that they provided, right? But you can also have the flexibility to choose a different text or passage or whatever it is that you may find interest or your students have shown you interest in that situation, right? You have that flexibility. We had that conversation. We just went to that campus, I want to say Tuesday. And so Tuesday when we went back, you had text in that classroom. Students were annotating the text. They were sharing their opinions on, why this article about, girls participating in sports was so, interesting to them. And the classroom was loud, but it was loud in a good way, right? Versus when they were just, oh, these kids might not be able to understand, this high-level text, and focusing just on the vocabulary. It was quiet, kids weren't engaged, so those are the places where you say, early adopters versus, kind of sticking to what feels safe and feels right. And so those are examples of like what we see happening, and that's just gonna be a process, right?
And I think that there is a lot of room in the curriculum in terms of what we want is the pacing to follow our scope and sequence. And there is a lot of resources, but teachers still have to customize it and make it feel personal to them. So if they don't they may choose a different text, like he was saying with the sports, because they know their students, and maybe reading about sports because they have a lot of athletes in the room. So there is a lot of room for, here is the guide, here are the standards that we're covering during this time, and then there's flexibility for the resources to use.
Wonderful, thank you. It sounds like that is a meaningful lever that potentially could have a great impact. So thank you for that, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Trustees, other questions? Trustee Singh?
Thanks for this presentation, really appreciate it. I wanted to know where we saw the most growth, particularly for economically disadvantaged students, and what you might attribute that to.
I'm going to caution our team before they answer that, that there are a whole bunch of variables.
Right,
so we'll do our very best, but we absolutely aren't researchers. As I'm looking at Dr. Foster, we're not researchers, or the expertise that you have, Trustee Singh, in program evaluation. So we'll do our best correlation of what we think are having the impact. But we do have a really good story about a particular campus growth.
So. And you can probably speak to the numbers. So we are still spending that time having those conversations on correlation, right? When we look at walkthrough data and improvements. And so we continue to look at various campuses because we might see a campus where we saw growth between SCA 1 and SCA 2, but then we didn't see the growth with MAP. And so then we're asking ourselves, well, where were the students in terms of their growth measure? Like she gave you an example of like a student starting here versus a student starting here and having, very little space to grow. So we keep combing over the data, but we did see big growth at one of our middle schools. I don't know, do we say the school's name, Dr. Elizalde?
I think we should say the school's name, yes.
So Martin Middle School was one of the schools that we seen some of the most growth at, but they had, again, 100% of their walkthroughs done. You all have had a chance to go over to see the principal, and she's very coachable, always willing to nurture that relationship between the teacher and the administrator, and they are thoroughly engaged in growing the strength of their PLCs and working that backwards design process. And so she's really bought into just execution of the work. For those of you that got a chance to go on the walk, you see how intentional she is about documenting, like, okay, what do we need to do? How do we grow? And she builds in a lot of the interventions for those students within the daytime on that campus. And so we saw pretty significant growth with Ms. Gryden at Martin Middle School.
But I want to add to something that the trustees always bring up that I think is a very important point. She also has very strong relationships with her teachers and her students and her families. But in terms of the teachers, and one of the other trustees talked about the relationship in the conversation. I think it was you, Trustee Lugo, just a few minutes ago. She has just built awesome relationships with her entire staff because she's authentic, she's transparent, she's caring. So the commonality of what they all want, the why they're all showing up is so common that she's able to then have those conversations. And what do we see? They're showing the greatest amount of students meeting their growth targets. So but she's also in the classroom. She also prioritizes those 10 to 15 minute walkthroughs. She coaches her assistant principals to do the same. And so her modeling, it's truly where the principal goes, there to go. The teachers feel supported. The teachers know that this is really getting back to the why of why they show up. And then what happens is, again, teachers have the success of their work. Well, that's going to motivate them because that's why they're showing up, is they want to see their efforts in their kids that they love so much.
Great, I really appreciate that. The other question I had, again, when we're looking at the data, we see, let me pull this up again, some disparities between, the eco-dis and the non-eco-dis in particular for our students who are in special education. And I just kind of wanted to know, I know we're going to be doing more of a deep dive in special education next month, but is there any new learnings or highlights that you wish to share with us that might help us better understand these scores?
And I think Dr. Stout might be able to give some specific examples, but going in with the intentional walkthroughs, looking at our special education students and looking at the accommodations and modifications in their IEP, and then looking for evidence of it in the classroom, we're seeing that there's a lot of growth to be made in that area, and that through our department plan moving forward and some additional professional training, that's an area of growth that we really need to focus on how to differentiate instruction and making sure that, the classroom instruction is being adjusted to meet the needs of the students.
And let me just add that, which I think this is exactly what our community has talked about, their concerns regarding special education and why you all wanted to make sure it was a part of the scorecard in the way that it is that this is the first time, because keep in mind that right now we're looking at the scores for 6th to 8th grade. And the reason this is important is in previous years, we didn't even provide this information to our teachers. We were waiting until it's the end of the year, right, when STAR is given, and it's like, here's where students are, as opposed to doing that mid-check of how's it going from something that's not a state assessment, but that's a normed reference, and we can see the growth, right? So this is truly the first time we're providing a comprehensive beginning to middle year check. How is it going? So if we wait till the end of the year to give teachers, feedback or data on students, we're really asking the impossible. How do I make adjustments when the only thing I'm going to have to provide some objective data, which I think some people would consider, STAR arguably not necessarily objective data to begin with. This allows them to see what are some areas so that they can be strategic in looking at, well, what were the modifications in that IEP, and where are they actually showing, hey, when we're doing this, this is resulting in some improvements. We're doing these other things and we're not seeing those improvements. Or is it that we're not doing the right modifications, or are we not implementing them correctly? This allows us to kind of help minimize that it's not, we got to work on all of this for the student.
That's right.
So we can make it more, again, trying to help teachers not just put in the hours that they have to put in meeting all of the student needs. We need to help minimize so that they do know where they're doing well and don't have to change that, only address the areas that need improvement.
Okay, thank you. And I really do appreciate as you were talking, I was like, you guys are kind of like detectives, trying to figure out, what is moving the needle. And so I really appreciate that. And I do hope that, when we do approve our budget in June, there's some way for trustees to really see some of this, something that helps to inform us that the budget is kind of informed by what you guys have seen is moving the needle for the populations that we have identified. That's how in my brain, I make the link between the budget and student outcomes. And so that's just kind of my request, I suppose. I don't know how you're going to do it, but that would be so wonderful. Like if there's a particular type of training, they're like, okay, we found that teachers who got this inclusion training or whatever tended to get much greater growth in their kids. And we know, okay, well, in the budget, hopefully we're investing in more of that type of training. So that's what I'm talking about. The other question I had is, you know, I love that presentation. Thank you. On the data with the little kids and everything.
That's the teacher in me.
I know. I love that. And I do appreciate, I mean, teaching is an art and a science. And, you know, so I appreciate seeing the sciencey part of it too. The other sciencey kind of piece that I personally would love to see more on, and maybe we can get like, this is part of our, a future board monitoring thing or something, is the neurosequential model and how that shows up in this curriculum work, because our district has invested a lot of money into like Bruce Perry, you know, kind of like that work, the SEL, the neurosequential model. I know like Terry Wood has done a lot of work, and I had the good fortune of seeing her do a presentation at Austin High like 4 years ago on this. And so I don't know if we're still doing that, but this is really fresh on my mind. I just finished reading What Happened to You, which all the trustees got a copy of. And, you know, y'all, this is like, there's this one table on here, and it's so like life altering in some ways as an educator, and I'm sure you guys probably know this, but it made me think about what you always say, Dr. Elizalde, about moving from the concrete to the abstract, and show, like the little lessons we did where you actually demonstrated that for us. And what this book talks about is, you know, when a child is in this sort of trauma-induced state, you know, like there's this whole continuum of going from terror to calm. But when a child is at sort of like a terror state, they're not even learning anything, right? They're just either like fight or flight mode. But once they get to like a calmer state, there's a state called alert, and that's when they can take in concrete information. But the next stage is calm, and that's when they can start doing the abstract. And so that when I read that, I was like, oh, I wonder, you know, I would love to have a conversation with you about this at some point. But how does that, like, I want to know, because we are trying to get kids from concrete to abstract. But how does, like, the brain science fit into this, particularly with regards to trauma, which our kids have experienced a lot of, and how is that showing up in the curriculum we're developing, in the feedback that teachers are getting in their walkthroughs? I want to see, I'm so curious to know what's happening there.
And so maybe next month we can bring our lesson, will be some examples of how that's incorporated into the lessons. But we do know that teachers have to be informed of those things about how the brain works when students are stressed, and how they need to self-regulate, and the state of mind that they need to be so that their minds are open to learning. So all of that is part of like some of the training and the resources we provide teachers. But I think that we could probably bring some examples when we do next month's board update.
And Dr. Twyla Williams did train all of the middle school counselors this year, and all of the middle school counselors had to roll out that training with their respective campuses, the work, the Bruce Perry work this year. So.
I appreciate that. That would be fantastic. And can I just say one more thing that really blew my mind when I saw this? And I know you read this book, Dr. President Rodriguez, but when a child is in like that terror state, their functional IQ is generally between 60 and 80. But once they get to the alert state, which is almost the calm state, they're at 110 to 90 functional IQ. But when they're in the calm state, they're in 120 to 100 functional IQ. So there's actually a difference. Now, I don't know. I know IQ is not always like the best test of how a kid learns, but I'm just saying. I'm so excited that you guys are amenable to sharing some of that with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Singh. Trustee Boswell?
Thank you all for this presentation. I appreciate it, and thank you for separating out the on or above grade level performance and the growth. That's helpful to see, and I appreciate the promise of separating that even further so we have a better sense of who's approaching that growth target, who's really distant from it. So thank you for that. I want to be sure I really understand how those growth targets are set. My understanding from your presentation is that it is at the 50th percentile of a like student, is what you set that at.
Yes, so every student receives a RIT score based on the test. And then so all of the students that had the same starting point, they look at previous historical performance, and then they target a distribution, and then look at what is the 50th percentile of projected growth. And so then you use that number then to set a growth target for each student based on their starting point, similar to other students that had the same starting point.
Okay, thank you for that. So tell me if I'm wrong, but it looks like you, based on that model, like our students' growth in reading is, for most groups, not quite what we would hope it would be based on that, not quite, not at that 50th percentile, that they're doing less well than we would expect them to as a group. And on math, that we're getting much stronger growth. Is that correct? And help me understand why that is.
Yes, and I don't know if you remember last year we brought a whole presentation on the level of lexile, the difficulty of the text from 5th grade, and the enormous jump from 5th grade to 6th grade. So one of the things is, in reading, it's the same skills. It's just the level of complexity and the level of lexile that the students have to be able to process and understand, analyze, and synthesize the information within the text. Versus math. Math has multiple little skills that build upon each other. So we're going to see, I think, accelerated growth in math because you're learning skills that are building upon versus the level of reading from 5th grade to 6th grade is such a big jump that there's more opportunities for students to have to really be able to process the text that they're reading and learn those skills. Similar to the example that Dr. Mays gave, teaching vocabulary in isolation is not going to help kids be able to decipher the text. We have to expose them to rigorous academic language vocabulary within the text and help them understand how to use context clues, how to use all the different strategies to make sense of the text when they run into words that they don't understand. And that's a skill that takes a little bit more time and practice, similar to athletes. You've got to, in order to be a better athlete, you have to practice, practice, practice. The same with reading. In order to be a better reader, you have to read, read, read.
Also, I'm sorry, I just want to add also, pardon me, is that that's part of the reason you all also wanted the grade 6 through 8 to be kept as a scorecard item, because if you're struggling in reading prior to getting to middle school, it is a bigger challenge, especially if not supported by the science of how to learn to read in middle grades, because it becomes a different skill. So as we're younger, we are learning to read. And as you get older, we should be able to read to learn. But if you aren't able to make that shift, which are different parts of our brain, then what happens, I become a middle schooler and I'm struggling in reading. I know I'm struggling in reading, and if we don't provide the scaffolds, what you do see is students don't want to dive into reading more complex, especially if we don't use things that are engaging and relevant to them. So we're going to see that reading is an area, which is also why we want to ensure that we provide the supports. As long as we've heard this in education, it is true. The more we invest earlier on, the more success our students are going to have at the secondary level. But we right now have to do both tracks. We need to invest early, and we can't just say to our middle school students like, well, you weren't part of the group where we really invested early on. So we have to run both of those. So we've got to have our interventions. And again, if you recall just from last month, you can see where MAP would show particular skills. So teachers can then utilize some of our digital and software applications so that students could be utilizing them to help them in that scaffolding of reading. But probably the most important thing at middle school is the choice of reading selection that we provide. If it is not something that is engaging to the student, and I'm already struggling in reading, we're not going to get the kind of depth and engagement. The student's not going to want to do productive struggle. Like that's pretty defined. So we're with you on that identification, Trustee Boswell, of, we're going to see these kinds of growth, because this isn't about our kids. Our kids are brilliant. It's in the system and what we've created that is not going to, that is keeping them from accelerating as quickly as they should. And we also know we think we can intervene and get that acceleration.
Okay, thank you. That's all very helpful, and I appreciate going back to that foundation and getting it right, and understand that we have to be on both tracks. And my deeper question is really, I see, we've talked a lot about the high leverage TEKS, filling in the gaps, and if we are expecting every kid to perform, if we're picking that 50th percentile for kids, it seems like the levers are working with math to accelerate that learning, to take kids farther than they would be expected to go in a normal year. And it looks like we're not quite doing that with reading. Like, it's not quite working at the 50th percentile, even with the complexity of literature, even with, if I'm understanding the system that MAP is, we're not quite getting even where we would expect the kids to be under this kind of normed tool that we're using.
Well, I would just say that it's 5 months that we've really begun to utilize this approach. And it's going to take at least a year and a half for us to really begin to see what I think will be ultimately at the achievement level. But it's going to start from the fact that reading is a very complex collection process. And when you've already had some experiences, and keep in mind, like our 6th graders, the last time they were in school in a normal, if you will, whatever normal was before, I don't know what was normal before pandemic, I don't know what we're gonna call it after, but the last time a current 6th grader had a non-interrupted school year was 3rd grade. And so I do think it's important to make sure that we're not expecting our teachers to think that students who were probably having some struggles in 3rd grade and are now in 6th grade putting in this comprehensive levers, and we've asked them to be implementing this for about 5 months. I think it's going to take us a little longer than that. I think if a year from now we're still not seeing any of those significant gains, then I think we have to go back and ask ourselves, is it the right intervention or is it being implemented properly? And then the other thing is the data that we're showing you is also, at a district-wide level. There are some areas either at a campus level or at a classroom level, as we dig down deeper into the data, that might even be able to tell us a little more on either end. Is this lever working where we see a different implementation level at a particular classroom or at a particular campus versus another place that may be really implementing it really well, and we're not seeing that. So I think there's still questions that we can still go back and ask for us to inform how are we going on our progression, on our slope of acceleration.
Great, that's all very helpful. Thank you for that, and appreciate the need for time. I hear that completely. And, I think that's one of the challenges we're hearing in a lot of things is the pressure to perform contrasted with the reality that we're dealing with not just regular academic learning, but so much else. So, I think that's absolutely the reality. And that's my next question. Are we seeking a deeper understanding of all those other whys? The role, Trustee Ashley mentioned attendance. Trustee Singh mentioned the neurosequential model and the trauma that our children, have brought with them, continue to bring with them, what that is. We've talked about mental health challenges a lot this year and last year. I know we have some teacher turnover and some classes that haven't had consistent teachers or where teachers have had to fill in. So to what degree are we looking at all of that and really looking ahead at the budget, making sure we have the counseling staff in place, making sure that we're doing the work we need to keep our teachers so they can have those relationships that we know students need and that consistency. I would just love to know, as we look forward to budget, how those other things play a role so that we can get everything in place to support the work that's being done with the lessons with the classrooms, because we know that this is an ecosystem and that we need those other scaffolds to hold up this good work and give it time to really take root.
Well, I think the challenge is that when we're in a budget season like we're in, the goal is to just be able to keep in place what we have. I would be disingenuous if I said we've got extra dollars and we're going to increase this or we're going to increase that. So I think that was part of our conversation regarding the first round of the budget conversation, to focus on the parameters of, we know what we definitely have to do is we have to ensure that at the campus, the classroom level has to be the first level that we maintain, that those parameters, as we stated in February, our revised budget proposal maintains a 6 out of 8 for our secondary school classroom teachers, and looking for ways in which to ensure that we build in that planning time for elementary, very much like the fact that we just demonstrated that at middle school becomes much more challenging if students haven't been able to be on grade level, the elementary level, so that we know our elementary teachers need that. So we've got the neurosequential model at a variety of schools, full-blown. We have some that are implementing different levels of the model. Then we have some social emotional learning approaches or strategies that are embedded within the curriculum. So some of the items are about where are we ensuring that we are integrating, because the more that we silo these things, the less we get away from student academic outcomes. And so I think we also have to be cautious of, we have to do this, 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 and then we take our eye off of the ball, which at the end of the day, we do have to find which are the things we can keep that have the biggest impact ultimately on our academic outcomes. And the last thing I'll say is, in education, because y'all are going to have to hear me say it, it is going to be very difficult for us to ever be able to say, this generated this result. We're going to always do our very best, but when we're dealing with the type of educational research that is the classroom and the student and the teacher, there are so many things that impact what could look like, man, this was a great program, had only to do with the fact that it was the great relationship between the teacher and the student and didn't have much to do with the program at all. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes we think it's this when it's that, because there are so many. Now, in a district this size, certainly we should be able to see some of those patterns that would give us more confidence that, well, it worked here, and it worked here, so we think it really is this. And those will be the things that we'll say, we want to invest more in these things, because we do see that that's generating the kind of outcomes that we're looking for. So we'll keep all of those things in mind that all of you raised, while still working to try to stay focused on, if everything is important, then we end up kind of giving that is some of the things that I ask our team. Don't just give me a list of everything we're doing. We have to make sure we're tying some outcomes that we think have some correlation, so that we are ensuring that we're doing the best we can to get the quickest results, but that are authentic, that are not so quick that we do not want to get away we don't want to sacrifice the curiosity and the engagement that children come to us, our students come to us with, that the minute we get into, oh, I need great results on these standardized tests, and then we think if we pull out these worksheets or do test prep, that we're going to get these outcomes. That's the thing we can do that will make kids absolutely not want to learn anything, and we know that that's very short-sighted. So we're just very fortunate that we have you all as a board that supports an authentic teaching and learning engagement model.
Thank you for that, and absolutely, I think that's exciting. And Dr. Mays, I appreciate the follow-up about what you saw in the classroom we visited and how that the entire environment and the richness of the learning had changed. I absolutely am glad to hear just that very concrete example of what this is doing. I have a question related to that. I mean, what are we doing? I understand getting insight from the classroom level through the walkthroughs. Are we seeking input from teachers for kind of co-creating, identifying what's working and what's not? What does that look like? And I would say as well, with that elementary planning time, we're hearing from a lot of teachers who have other plans to suggest. And is there room for teachers? I mean, we need to keep our teachers. We need our teachers to be solid so they can take care of our kids. What are we doing to engage teachers as co-creators as we move forward and implement all of this?
So I can start, and then Dr. Mays can talk about what our next steps are. So we have been getting feedback from our essentials teachers, music, art, and PE, and they've funneled up their suggestions to the directors. And so we met on Tuesday to go through the various different models, and we had some criteria. Does it meet the 450 minutes of uninterrupted planning time for our teachers? Is it meeting the 135 minutes of PE? And so we are looking at the various suggestions and kind of talking through problem solving. And then Dr. Mays is kind of going to involve some more engagement with our principals and our teachers.
So just kind of going back to the beginning, each vertical team has focus groups, and so those are all teachers from every campus, and so that's what kind of brought on the ask and the drive for the additional planning time. That was something that has been high on their priority list from day one, and so that focus group that takes place throughout the year. So we're always gathering that feedback from them. The next step for us is, of course, pulling together principals from all over the district, and they, of course, have been having conversations with visual and performing art teachers. We also have community stakeholders that we're engaged with, too, to incorporate all of that feedback and begin to look at opportunities. And this isn't going to be something that we generate, per se. This is going to be something that's organically created by them based on feedback that they have, they gather. And so we're at the early stages of that. And I mean, I would say within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we'll have a better sense of what they create can look like. I think the other place where we gather data organically is through our PLCs, right? PLCs at the campus level, and I'm not talking about just for the particular elementary situation, but just in general, they're able to generate feedback to principals, to assistant principals, because everybody's collectively sitting in those meetings having conversations about what's working and what's not. So. And that's an ongoing process. And of course, that funnels up to executive directors and to our office.
Thank you for that. And it won't be a surprise to you that I appreciate that very much. Hearing that there's a plan to really talk with those elementary campuses for their ideas too, because I believe very strongly that we get to the best solutions when we take the vast knowledge of you and your team, Dr. Elizalde, and that knowledge of what happens in the classroom every single day, because we have immense knowledge there as well, and then our community. So thank you for that. And I know that many families are very concerned about the loss of perhaps some art time, some music time, larger PE classes, whatever that might look like, and letting people know this is still a work in progress in the family newsletter might be very welcome. Because we're hearing, all of us, from a lot of people who don't understand that, and that might be very helpful just to make sure people understand that this is evolving with input from that direction. So thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say, though, because I heard the use of loss of time, and I don't want to just let that hang out there. because that's, our intent is to create a plan that would not have loss at that time, but it's not a posted agenda item, so I don't want to get too much further. So I just didn't want to.
Thank you.
I thank you for
Glad to
bringing
hear
it
that.
up, but I don't want to just leave that out there because we've
Absolutely.
already met and had some conversations, and there are already some adjustments with regard to that.
Thank you.
Thank you, trustees. Other questions? I know trustee Zapata.
So I'm just curious how on the growth chart, the teacher is doing so much and they're feeling overwhelmed and doing a lot of things that teachers didn't have to be attentive to, right? It was just mostly teaching. So as part of the growth, I see the need for how do we track how we're giving homework that parents can help support the work in the classroom. Just an example, and this is just something I did because I'm visually impaired. So when my daughters were in pre-K and kinder, they had to learn their alphabet. And we did it by singing, we did it in many different ways because they had to learn to read so they could read me my bills. They could read, they would spell out words when we would go to the grocery store and learn how to look at the prices and to help me know, what our budget is and how much we can spend. So they were doing all that for me in elementary school. And a lot of students can do that too, so it's doing a lot of what is going on in the classroom is interesting, but how does that connect to their daily lives and so that they can understand how it's connected to what's at home. It's not, a school is not by itself over here, but it's connected to what you're doing on a daily basis with your family, if that makes any sense. I couldn't afford childcare either, so my girls went to the library every day for 12 years. So they're excellent readers. They always entered reading contests, and the librarian had organized activities. So it's how do we work with our community to support, again, what we're trying to grow in our students in the classroom. So I just thought that's, and that is probably going to help us move those bars faster because the teachers won't be doing it by themselves. The school won't be doing it by themselves. So I think that's work that I see that I'm trying to build right now in District 2. So, and it's very important work because then again, then the parents see the value and understand, oh, I got to be part of this. I got to help my child. So it's not for not wanting to, or it doesn't matter that I'm working 2 or 3 jobs, but it's going to make sense for them to support their child in the homework areas because it's, they're helping at home and they're learning at home with them and not even realizing that's what's happening. So as you talked about, so the other thing, you mentioned that all the counselors went through some training. And I think because I have talked to so many parents, so many people in the schools, that first aid mental health training is something we should do for every campus because they don't have to be experts on mental health, anything, but they can learn signs just like when they do first aid. And that's something that we did for free. David Evans with Integral Care, they have counselors who do that for free. And so because of where we are, if we don't address that intentionally with every single custodian, office staff, everybody, then everybody owns it and can bring attention to, to some of those challenges students are having. Because we can do the best and bring in the best programs in the classroom, but we have to be holistic and engage the whole campus and parents and community as we move towards helping, because it's going to take all of us to raise those bars. And so we can also help our teachers to not be so stressed and let them do what they do best, and that's teaching. So there's a lot more things, but I just want to leave that piece of community and parents and how we play a role to help move these bars higher.
And Trustee Zapata, you and I had also talked about the mentors and starting at middle school. And as you were talking, I'm like, that would be a first area of training then, would be on the mental health component, on the neurosequential model, on SEL. So, and I think with regard to the homework, there's, I think part of that is, I think it's absolutely another lever. We have not comprehensively tackled that yet, because we do know we have to do bite-sized pieces, because there's a lot of good research about what's helpful, but there's also a lot of things that we sometimes can send home that aren't helpful. And so it's, again, it's one of those, like, we need to come together to do it, so we roll it out in an effective manner that does bring people together, as opposed to like, oh my gosh, my child's gonna get penalized because they didn't get this done. And so it's, we just want to make sure it is a lever. We have not gotten to that lever yet. And thank you for raising that. And we will definitely take note. We'll work on that one also, along with all the other items that the trustees have raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Zapata. Trustees, other questions? Trustee Lugo.
All right. Thank you. All right, so I have one comment and 3 requests. My comment actually builds off of what Trustee Zapata, you've been mentioning about parental involvement, and I like to think of it more in terms of like involving that one caring adult, because a lot of the research in, what helps some young people kind of overcome the obstacles in their life versus what might stand in the way. And oftentimes it's like having that one caring adult, that one person. But anyhow, yesterday, I think, a handful of us went to the Avance luncheon, and it was really great to hear some of their outcomes and just be part of that experience. And so the commentary there is maybe, as the district continues to look at partnerships and, really leveraging the great work that's already being done and how those partnerships can help our students and our staff, Avance would be a great partner to look at. Relatedly, my request is, I think probably for a future meeting or workshop or something, really kind of having a deeper conversation about mission-driven programs versus outcome-driven programs, because I think there's value in both, but it's a fine line. So what I mean by mission-driven programs is that there might be some programs that organizations invest in because those programs speak to the organization's mission or speaks to their value, and the program either may or may not be evidence-based, right? And then there are evidence-based programs. You have the outcomes, you have a model. It's not driven by what sometimes makes programs successful, which is that charismatic, leader, or the relationship between a person and the participants. So I do have that request as let's have a deeper conversation about mission-driven programs versus outcome-driven programs. The other request is that, first, an appreciation that y'all are gathering teacher feedback and really looking at, how to how to best use the feedback to continue improving the work that y'all are doing, both in curriculum implementation, but also those walkthroughs. So my request there is really looking, into the future and saying, okay, at what point can we systematize student feedback? Because I really, y'all are going to get sick of me because I'm going to talk about student feedback, because I really believe that our students have so much to teach us. I could go on, but I'm going to practice self-restraint. And my third request is for an update about the budget talks, and really looking at, how can both the board and the district communicate more effectively with the public about, yes, here are the tough choices that we're making, and yes, it is an iterative process, right? We're looking at different solutions, and really getting that message out to people so they understand. There may be some choices where nobody's happy, but that's not the intent. It's really, what are some of the choices where we're like, okay, at the end of the day, what are the levers that are most important? What are the things that are most critical to maintain? So that is my request for some sort of budget talks or some other messaging that's meaningful and engaging with the community.
Thank you, Trustee Lugo. Trustees, other comments? First of all, I just want to say I appreciate our trustees and the goal tonight around monitoring and ensuring our reality matches the vision presented. And Dr. Elizalde, I have one question, which is really a question about equity. As I kind of view the idea of having a balanced budget so that we can invest in areas where we have needs, when I look at the data, and actually you and your team have highlighted this before, when you look at the data by race and you look at individuals that are economically disadvantaged in the white category, and you look at the scores or the progress for students that are Hispanic or African American that are non-economically disadvantaged, you see that the scores are lower. And so I struggle to, what does that mean? How do we invest in our budget aligned to making sure that's the case? Are you disaggregating below that by site? Because is there a site issue, a campus issue, or is there a system issue around that? Because if we're going to be talking about a vision of equity and asking ourselves if the reality matches that vision, I struggle to find a way to make sure that we're investing, because as you have already noted, and we've all agreed with you, that we need to have a balanced budget in order to invest in these areas. But how does the trustee make sense of this kind of inequitable data, which I appreciate because we're monitoring it, and yes, I understand systemic changes and they take time in organizations, and you're using good change management theory to do that over a time period. But how does a trustee either make sense of that or communicate that to the public?
Well, I think the first thing is, as I, at least as I recall our earlier conversations, is it is the first time we're actually disaggregating the data in this way publicly. And so I think part of this is because we have confidence that our public wants to ensure that our organization is equitable in its mission and vision, as you all have created our strategic framework with our priorities and our focus areas. And I think we all, starting certainly with me, have to keep bringing the data until that data starts to move in the direction where non-economically disadvantaged students of color are not sitting below any group. And when economically disadvantaged students of color or not of color are not below other groups. So I'm not sure I'm really answering your question because I'm not sure I really fully understood it. I know we have a ways to go, but I do think that the first thing is, which is why we've pointed out this pattern. And while there are one or two outliers in one or two areas, meaning there are one or two schools that we do see occasionally this type of disproportionate data, the percentage of students of color at those campuses is very small. So by and far, this is an organizational challenge, not one where I would say, oh, it's just at this part of our community or just at these schools or just, it isn't a just. I have to accept right now that the data that I'm presenting to you for our organization is an organizational systemic view of our student performance, which ultimately means our work.
No, you answered my question. Trustees, thank you again for all the questions, and thank you, Dr. Elizalde and your team. As part of our commitment to monitoring, the last question is to ask my colleagues, our trustees, to accept the report presented tonight, and if not, to ask if this is still the right strategy for the district. So trustees, please raise your right hand if you're ready to accept tonight's report. Thank you again, trustees, for taking part in this shared commitment to students and to student outcomes. Dr. Elizalde, your team, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And let's see here. Colleagues, we're going to move to the public testimony on consent item, but I just wanted without objection, I just wanted to take a point of privilege and just share a message from Trustee Letitia Anderson, who had to leave a little bit early, but she asked me to read a quick statement, if you all don't mind, into the record. And this is from Trustee Letitia Anderson. I first would like to apologize to staff for having to leave before sharing this statement. The African American heritage is not only essential to know the contributions African Americans have and continue to make in this country, but it's also a time to recognize that representation does matter. And I'd like to take a moment to thank those that look like me, and thank you for your commitment to public education and for the support you give to the student and families in Austin ISD. So I just wanted to share that statement and message from Trustee Anderson. Trustees, we're going to move now to the public testimony for items on consent agenda. Members of the public wishing to participate in the public testimony portion of our meeting call the dedicated AISD phone line in advance of the meeting to sign up to speak in person or to audio record their remarks. And tonight, and Dr. Regis is correct, we don't have anyone signed up. We have one person who is signed up to speak, and we'll now play that recorded message for public testimony, so please listen carefully.
Buenas tardes, mi cordial saludo, doctora Elizalde y mesa directiva. Soy monitor del South Target Terminal, Griselda de Castillo. Estoy llamando acerca del artículo número 13.5. Estoy satisfecha que el distrito y mesa directiva estén reconociendo las contribuciones importantes con todo el personal por pagar por las horas perdidas durante días de invierno. Ningún empleado debe dejarse fuera de pagos por cierres relacionados con el clima. No puedo parar de pagar cuentas o de llevar la comida a la mesa de mi familia. Muchas gracias, tengan buen día. Sinceramente, Griselda de Castillo.
This is an English interpretation of Griselda del Castillo's message. Good afternoon. My best regards to Dr. Elizalde and board members. I'm a South Sagar Terminal Monitor, Griselda del Castillo. I am calling about article number 13.5. I'm satisfied because the district and the board are recognizing all the staff for their important contributions, for paying for the lost hours during winter days. None of the employees must be left out of payment for the closings related to the weather. I can't stop paying my bills or bringing food to my family's table. Thank you and have a good day. Sincerely, Griselda del Castillo.
This concludes public testimony. Trustees, are there any questions or clarifications on the public testimony? As a reminder, please feel free to share any general comments or questions on non-voting items with the board by email at trustees@austinisd.org. I should also remind the public that during our general information board meetings, we do make time for general comments that are not specific or related to our particular agenda items. We're going to move to the consent agenda. Trustees, are there any consent items anyone would like to pull for a separate vote? Trustee Lugo.
Yeah, I'd like to pull 13.5.
Trustee Lugo, 13.5. Is there a second? Kevin, Trustee Foster. Any other items? Trustees? Okay, is there any discussion on any of I'm sorry, Secretary Singh, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Yes, I moved, excuse me, I moved to approve items 9.1 and 9.2, 10.1 to 10.3, 11.1 through 11.3, 12.1 through 12.2, and 13.1 through 13.4.
Is there a second? Second. I'm sorry, it was Trustees. Trustees, is there any discussion on any of these consent items? Having a motion by Secretary Singh and a second by Trustee Zapata to approve consent agenda items 9.1 to 9.2, 10.1 to 10.3, 11.1 to 11.3, 12.1 to 12.2, and 13.1 to 13.4. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. And the motion passes by all those on the dais. So we will now move to those items pulled from the agenda, and the agenda item is 13.5. Trustee Singh, do we have a motion?
Yes, I move to approve item 13.5.
Is there a second? Was that Trustee Lugo? No, Trustee Zapata. Okay. Trustees, any questions or comments on 13.5? Trustee Lugo?
Yeah, thank you. So, I will take ownership of the fact that I did not ask these questions during the agenda preview. Can y'all remind me, was this resolution in board docs during the information session? And I may just have missed it, but I just wanted to clarify.
Hello, Trustee Lugo. Yes, a copy of this resolution, it has not changed since then, was included in the board information session.
Thank you. So yeah, I take responsibility that I did not submit my questions earlier, but I wanted to make sure that I understand what it is that I'm voting for in this resolution, especially after the, the goodwill from the resolution that we voted on to give campus serving staff 2 days off. So can you explain to me who all is getting paid from this resolution? Is there like an outlier group? When I read the resolution and it says, now therefore be it resolved, and this is on the second page, the AISD, Austin ISD shall pay all employees who, right, And then the second point is, AISD shall award all non-exempt employees for hours they would have worked. So can you explain those 2 points?
Yes, Trustee Lugo, I can. So first, it's probably important to reference, and it's mentioned up higher, one of our policies, Policy DEA Local, actually applies to professional employees and some other employees that have contracts. And, they technically are not paid hourly. So they're paid a salary, and they're paid whether we have a bad weather day or not. And that's clarified in our policy, but the policy also requests that trustees need to ratify and, basically say that they support that being part of the public purpose, which is a big portion of this resolution. So that covers any of our professional employees, teachers, counselors, librarians, administrators here at central office. So another category of employees is our hourly employees, our non-exempt staff. So again, because the board needs to ensure that they're covering the public, that they're providing for the public purpose with any purchases that they make, we're just agreeing here that due to safety for our staff and for our students, and recognizing the important role that all these staff play, that we still want to provide those staff pay. But of course, those staff aren't paid a salary, they're paid hourly, and some staff work 6 hours a day, some work 8. So we needed to clarify that they would be awarded the hours that they would have worked. And it gets a little different depending on the position. So bus drivers bid on routes and they get those routes. But we could still somewhat say that they have a certain number of hours they would have received. So this is saying that all of those employees will still receive those hours. So it is similar to saying that they would have been paid the same. The one exception I would make is that an employee who perhaps was already at 40 hours on Wednesday, maybe just because they were asked to pick up another shift, maybe they're a bus driver and they picked up additional work, and then had they worked on Thursday and Friday, maybe they would have been at 48. And so those 8 hours would have been overtime pay. Well, because we were closed, those 8 hours for those staff members would just be at their regular time. Now, employees who we did request to come in on this day, and again, this is allowed by our policy and referenced in this resolution, they were awarded pay at 1.5 times, whether they were at 40 hours or not. So if they were at 30, but they were asked to come in on Thursday and Friday, we gave them time and a half. And we had about 24 staff who fell into that category. So I think the last part of your question, who would not be included on here? So some of the staff who don't fall under non-exempt may be substitutes. It may be some part-time hourly staff, depending on the position. But those positions that are not always dedicated for those days. So they would not receive pay for those days since their services were not utilized and they're not considered a exempt or non-exempt staff.
Thank you. So, excuse me, using that example, I just want to kind of make it more concrete. So for a substitute who would be paid hourly, because schools were closed, it's not like that person had a set schedule for the week. And so that's one reason why they wouldn't be eligible to be paid. Are there any other? I know this often comes up, like, well, who's exempt, substitutes, and why, and we get a lot of emails about it. So I'm just trying to kind of head this off at the pass, so to speak.
So you're just asking,
are there any other reasons why substitutes or any other categories of staff might not receive payment under this resolution? Because I think you mentioned there might be, a cafeteria worker, right? And they only work X many hours a week. That's the part that if we can just be clear about that so that folks don't have a false expectation.
Sure.
Because I think that's where sometimes the good intention might fall a little flat, is that both the intent and that outcome aren't necessarily clearly articulated in simple terms, and so that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. So even with the example of like a cafeteria worker, they may not work 40 hours a week. They may work 20 hours a week. And Thursday and Friday, they may have earned, 4 hours for those 2 days. they would still earn just those 4 hours. They would not receive a full 16 hours because that's not what they would have worked had those days been open. As far as other categories other than substitutes, I do believe substitutes is the largest. I believe that lunchroom monitors is another, and I apologize, I don't know how many lunchroom monitors we have, but they're a part-time hourly that would not be included under this.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad you mentioned the lunch monitors. What about the school monitors? The
Bus
folks-
monitors?
Yes.
I believe that they would be included, and I don't hear Ms. Stevens correcting me. She is on Zoom, so I think it's safe to say that
Okay.
bus monitors are
Yes, they
included.
would. Yeah. Yes, they would be.
Okay. All right. I think those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Lugo. Trustees, any other questions? Trustee Zapata?
I just want to clarify again. You mentioned that lunchroom, the cafeteria workers did not fall under the right to get paid for those days?
So
No, cafeteria workers are getting, it was lunchroom monitors.
Oh,
Like if
okay.
I come and I work for 1 hour
Yeah.
and I work Monday and Wednesday, those temporary type employees were not included. This was intended, essentially, it was intended to capture as much as all could actually legally be included. So cafeteria workers, and the intent here is to make every employee whole, is probably the best way for me to put it. So if I am a cafeteria worker and they typically work, let's say, 30 hours a week, it's to make sure that cafeteria worker got paid for 30 hours that week, even though 2 days, they wouldn't have had the 30 hours because of the 2 days we were closed. We don't want them to be penalized because we were closed for those 2 days. Then if they had met those 30 hours, it would be whatever the typical, they can still get whatever they would have typically worked. So if they had typically worked, say, 6 hours each day, then they would get an additional 12 hours. It would not be time and a half if you did not physically show up.
Yeah, it would be.
It would be a
42
regular
hours straight time.
But we did have some employees that we did need for, just to run, our facilities. And those individuals did get time and a half, whether it was over the 40 hours or not, because in a fairness, they were physically having to come in, whether they had already had their 40 hours or not.
Thank you, Trustee Lugo.
So I have one more request because that got me thinking. So you're right. So I was looking at some of the social media tweets. Every now and then I go on to Twitter and try to put something out there. And I was reminded the number of times that bus drivers have really come in and help us. Everything from making Wi-Fi available to delivering water bottles, right, the bottles of water, and everything in between. There was this really awesome tweet from an AISD employee, and one of the bus drivers that he remembers from when he was a student is still a bus driver. And so my request is, and I know it's not on tonight's agenda, so I know we're not going to be able to talk about it, but my request is for the team of 10 and your executive team, Chief Stevens, for us to think about, I know the transportation department essentially has missed out on the 2 days off, and there was an intent behind why those days off were set, and I get that, but I am hoping that the district can look at a way to recognize the transportation department in a meaningful way and work with them, hear directly from them, like what would they want. I know they had a luncheon. I think Chief Segura mentioned they had a luncheon recently. It's School Bus Appreciation Month or something. So I know y'all are trying. My hope is that there can be a little bit more for them.
Thank you, Trustee Lugo. Trustees, any other questions? Having a motion by trustee Singh and a second by trustee Zapata to approve item 13.5, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. And the motion passes by all those on the dais. We're now going to move to the abstention items for separate vote, and we have two items. Trustee Singh, do we have a motion to approve agenda item 14.1?
Yes, I move that we approve item 14.1.
Is there a second?
Second.
Trustee Wagner. Trustees, is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, and having a motion by Secretary Singh and a second by Trustee Wagner to approve item 14.1, interlocal agreement with the University of Texas at Austin for the 2022 UT Prep Summer Program. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those against? All those abstaining? So the motion passes 8-4, 0 against, and showing Trustee Foster abstaining from the vote. I'm sorry, did I?
7-4, because trustee Anderson.
5, 6, 7, yeah, sorry. The motion passed 7-4, 0 against, and 1 abstention, showing Trustee Foster abstaining. Trustee Singh, do we have a motion to approve agenda item 14.2?
Yes, I move we approve item 14.2, renewal of interlocal cooperation agreement with the City of Austin to financially support literacy first programs.
Okay, and I have a second from Trustee Ashe.
Second.
Trustees, any discussion on this item? Hearing none and having a motion by Secretary Singh and a second by Trustee Ashe to approve agenda item 14.2, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those against, all those abstaining, and the motion passes 7-4, 0 against, 1 abstention, showing Trustee Wagner abstaining. So we'll now move on to items for separate vote. Trustee Singh, do we have a motion to approve agenda item 15.1?
Yes, I move that we approve item 15.1, approval of contract for improvements at Graham Elementary School, reissued 22 CSP 020.
Is there a second? Trustee Zapata. Trustees, is there any discussion on this item? Having a motion by Secretary Singh and a second by Trustee Zapata to approve agenda item 15.1, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. And the motion passes by all those on the dais. Trustees, tonight we were also scheduled to discuss item 15.2, BE Local, which trustees discussed with our consultant at the May and December board retreat and during our information meeting. I'm requesting we postpone this item to our next regular voting meeting in March and allow trustees time to discuss during our retreat tonight and our upcoming information board meeting as needed. Trustee Singh, do we have a motion to postpone agenda item 15.2?
Yes, I move we postpone item 15.2, BE Local board meetings to the March 24th regular voting meeting.
Is there a second? Trustee Foster raised his hand.
Foster beat you.
Trustee, is there any discussion on this item? Trustee Wagner.
I'm a little confused by the decision to postpone since we've had discussions on this item on numerous occasions already. And it basically leaves us without clear board operating procedure. So I'm a little curious as to why we're pushing this again.
So I can explain, or I don't know if Trustee Ashe or Trustee Singh would like to. Trustee, okay, thank you. So Trustee Ashe, myself, Trustee Singh, and Dr. Reach had a meeting around some of the issues inside of the way we're operating, and there was several issues that were raised that were not resolved, and we thought we could resolve some of them either tonight or at the next meeting but made a decision to make a motion to postpone it because of that. And I think that all of us would like to make sure that this policy is in place sooner than later. And I think that we had proposed to postpone it at this meeting. I hope that's it. I'm just checking myself here.
May I ask if those concerns were raised by multiple trustees? Was that something that you were hearing universally, since we have had discussion about it in the past?
I think we Trustee Singh raised some concerns. I don't know if other trustees had done it, because obviously under the Open Meetings Act, we can't talk to more than 4 of us. But I think that we wanted to make sure that all the trustees were in a consensus about where we're headed with them. And we'll get more into it in our meeting in a few, the retreat that we're having tonight. Yep. Okay, thank you, Trustee Wagner. Having, any other questions, trustees? Having a motion by Secretary Singh and a second by Trustee Foster to postpone agenda item 15.2, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those opposed? So the motion passes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's it. The motion passes 6 in favor and 2 opposed and 0 abstaining. Trustees, we're now going to recess the open meeting at 9:28 p.m. and move to executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code sections 551.074, 551.072, 551.073, 551.087, 551.076, and 551.071. For our viewers at home, this concludes our live broadcast. When we're finished with the executive session, we will briefly return to open session to formally adjourn the meeting. And the adjournment will be recorded and be included in all replays of tonight's meeting. And we want to thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a good evening.